Hello and welcome. The screams never stop in Avernus. They echo across rivers of molten metal, reverberate through canyons carved by ancient wars, and pierce the sulphurous sky where no star has ever shone. But among those countless voices of the damned, there are some that carry a different quality. Not the wails of sinners receiving their due punishment, not the howls of devils reveling in cruelty, but something else entirely, the anguished cries of heroes who chose damnation, warriors who rode willingly into what they believed was the abyss itself, thinking they could turn the tide of the blood war. These are the voices of the Hellriders, and their story is one of the most tragic chapters ever written in the blood-soaked annals of the Nine Hells. The city of Elturel stands as a beacon along the river Shinthar, its cobblestone streets and sturdy walls a testament to mortal determination. This was not always a city protected by divine light. Long before the companion appeared in the sky above Elturel, the city depended on its own strength and the courage of its defenders. The people of Elturel knew fear intimately. They understood that civilization was a fragile thing, a candle flame that could be snuffed out by the cruel winds of chaos and evil that swept across Faerun. The Hellriders emerged as the city's elite protectors. They were not merely soldiers performing duties for coin. They were warriors bound by oath, paladins and fighters who swore to defend Elturel and the surrounding lands from any threat, no matter how dire. Their name came from their fearlessness in facing down fiendish threats. While other warriors might retreat before demons or devils, the riders of Elturel charged forward. They earned their reputation through countless battles against infernal incursions, their courage never wavering even when confronted by supernatural horrors. You must understand the nature of these warriors to grasp why they would follow an angel into what they believed was the abyss. The riders of Elturel represented an ideal, a promise that mortals could stand against the darkness through skill and dedication. They trained relentlessly, honing their combat abilities until they could face fiends and emerge victorious. They studied the tactics of devils, learned the weaknesses of demons, and prepared themselves for battles that most could not imagine surviving. The catalyst for everything that followed came from the celestial realms. Zariel was her name, an angel whose righteous fury burned with intensity that seemed to illuminate the heavens themselves. She was not mortal, but a solar, one of the most powerful celestial beings in existence. Her companion was Lulu, a hierophant whose innocence and joy contrasted sharply with Zariel's militant determination. Together, they had fought demons wherever they appeared. But Zariel grew increasingly frustrated with celestial restraint. The blood war raged eternal between devils and demons, an endless conflict that consumed both sides. Zariel believed the forces of good were making a terrible mistake by remaining neutral in this conflict. If righteous warriors joined the fight, if they struck at the demons directly, they could tip the balance and perhaps end the threat these chaotic fiends posed to all of creation. Her superiors in the celestial hierarchy disagreed. They counseled patience, argued that mortals and angels alike had no place in the blood war, that such intervention would lead only to corruption and tragedy. Zariel defied these orders. She descended from Mount Celestia with a vision. She would lead a crusade of mortals against the forces of the abyss, not to conquer, not for glory, but to strike a meaningful blow against demonkind. If she could demonstrate that such a crusade could succeed, perhaps the celestial powers would commit fully to ending the demon threat once and for all. Her charisma and conviction drew followers from across the Sword Coast. Warriors from many cities answered her call, but it was in Elturel that her message resonated most powerfully. The riders of Elturel had always stood ready to face fiendish threats. When an angel herself appeared offering to lead them against the source of those threats, many saw it as a divine calling they could not refuse. 3 mortal commanders emerged to lead the Elturian forces. Alanthius was the first, a paladin whose tactical brilliance and steady leadership made him the natural choice to command the riders of Elturel. His presence lent legitimacy to the crusade, transforming it from a celestial vision into a mortal enterprise with Elturel as its headquarters. Yale came from the village of Idleglen, bringing her own forces to join the growing army. She and Alanthius formed a bond that would deepen into love as they prepared for the battle ahead. The third general was Haruman, a paladin of Helm whose forces pledged their aid, bringing expertise and numbers that strengthened the crusade significantly. These 3 worked closely with Zariel and Lulu, planning and training the growing army. The Crusaders came to revere their angel commander, seeing in her everything they aspired to be: righteous, powerful, unwavering in purpose. Zariel spoke of turning the tide of the blood war, of striking such a blow against demonkind that the abyss itself would recoil. Her vision was intoxicating, and thousands embraced it. The exact number of crusaders has been lost to time and conflicting accounts, but sources suggest the army numbered in the thousands. These were not desperate mercenaries or glory-hungry fools. They were believers, warriors who genuinely thought their sacrifice could change the multiverse. Fathers and mothers said goodbye to their children, knowing they might march into the abyss and never return. Young idealists joined alongside hardened veterans. They brought their own weapons, armor, and mounts. The riders of Elturel had always been cavalry, and this would be no different. The preparation took time, though accounts vary on exactly how long. Months, perhaps years, as the crusade gathered strength and refined its plans. Clerics and wizards worked to create the portals that would carry an army to another plane. Strategists debated tactics for fighting in an environment no mortal had experienced. Through it all, Zariel's certainty never wavered. Faith would sustain them, she insisted. Their cause was righteous, their purpose pure. Then came the event that would trigger everything. In the year 1354, by Dale reckoning, the demon Lord Yinagu descended upon settlements along the winding water. The beast of butchery, master of gnolls, slaughtered villagers with savage abandon. When word reached the Crusaders, Zariel saw it as both outrage and opportunity. Yinagu's presence on the material plane was the perfect target for their first strike. The crusade mobilized rapidly. They pursued Yinagu's forces to the village of Idleglen, Yale's home. The battle that followed seemed at first to favor the Crusaders. They drove back the demonic forces with righteous fury. Their holy weapons and divine magic devastating the chaotic fiends. Victory appeared within reach. But Yinagu had not come to the material plane for slaughter alone. He had come to set a trap. In the midst of the battle, the demon lord broke through the Crusader lines and seized Yale herself. Before anyone could react, he tore open a portal, a great rift in reality that blazed with hellish light. With Yale as his captive, Yinagu plunged through. Zariel did not hesitate. She commanded an immediate pursuit. Alanthius and the other Crusaders charged after their captured general and the demon lord, believing the portal would lead to the abyss as expected. Thousands of mounted warriors thundered through the gateway, following their angel commander into what they thought would be Demonkind's home territory. The transition was jarring. One moment riding across familiar ground, the next emerging onto a blasted hellscape of burning rock and sulfurous air. But this was not the abyss. The chaotic madness of that realm was absent, replaced by something more ordered, but no less terrible. They had emerged in Avernus, the first layer of the 9 hells. Yinagu's trap revealed its full cunning. He had led them not to the abyss, but to Avernus, where a demonic army waited. The Crusaders found themselves fighting demons in the heart of devil territory, exactly the situation most likely to provoke both infernal and abyssal attention. The battle erupted immediately. Thousands of warriors clashing with demonic forces, while the very ground beneath them burned with hellfire. Some of the Crusaders panicked. They had prepared to fight demons in the abyss with an angel at their head. Finding themselves in the 9 hells instead shattered their confidence. Fear took hold, and a portion of the army, led by a warrior named Jander Sunstar, broke and fled back through the portal. In their terror, they sealed it behind them, trapping everyone who remained in Avernus with no way to retreat. This betrayal would echo through the centuries. Those who fled became the first to bear the name Hellriders, a title born from shame rather than honor. They had ridden into hell and abandoned their comrades there. The name stuck, though later generations would interpret it differently. As warriors brave enough to fight fiends, rather than those who had fled from that fight. Those who remained fought with desperate courage. Zariel led from the front, her celestial blade carving through demons with terrible efficiency. Lulu fought beside her, the Hierophant's seemingly gentle nature concealing fierce protective power. Alantheus, Yale, and Haruman commanded their forces with skill born from years of training. For a time, it seemed they might actually prevail against the demon host. Then the devils joined the battle. Massive formations of infernal warriors approached from across the Avernian wastes. The Crusaders had been fighting demons, but they were in devil territory. The archdevils who ruled Avernus would not tolerate either demons or uninvited mortals waging war on their lair. Devil legions crashed into the battle, attacking demons and crusaders alike. The fighting became a three-way massacre. Demons tried to overwhelm the crusaders and devils both. Devils sought to eliminate the demonic incursion, while also dealing with the mortal army that had invaded their domain. The crusaders, trapped between both forces, fought simply to survive. The battlefield became a charnel house, bodies piling so high they formed hills of the dead. Zariel engaged in an aerial duel with Terzareg, a powerful devil general. The battle between angel and fiend shook the sky above Avernus. Terzareg managed to sever Zariel's right hand, sending her sword tumbling toward the ground below. Zariel leaped from Lulu's back and dove after her weapon, with the devil in hot pursuit. At the last moment, she caught her blade, reversed her flight, and drove it through Terzareg's breast. The devil's death created a massive explosion that engulfed that section of the battlefield in red dust and hellfire. But even this victory could not change the inevitable outcome. The Crusaders were finite in number. The demons seemed endless, and the devils commanded forces that dwarfed both. One by one, the mortals fell. Some died cleanly in battle, fortunate enough to find quick ends. Others were captured, dragged away by chain devils and bone devils to fates far worse than death. Zariel herself was buried beneath a mountain of corpses, both devil and demon. The battle had left her broken and unconscious, surrounded by the bodies of those who had followed her into damnation. When servants of Asmodeus found her among the carnage, they did not kill her. The Lord of the Nine Hells had been watching the battle with great interest. He saw in this fallen angel something valuable, qualities that would make an excellent devil. Alantheus and Haruman were among those captured. The exact fate of Yale varies in different accounts, but what followed for all the surviving Crusaders was a test of faith, and while unlike anything they had endured in battle, the devils did not simply imprison or torture them. They offered bargains, presented choices, exploited weaknesses with the patience and cunning that defined infernal nature. Zariel recovered in the depths of the Nine Hells, far from the celestial realms where her essence might have reformed. Asmodeus himself appeared before her, though accounts differ on the exact circumstances. In some tellings, he made his offer immediately on the battlefield. In others, she was brought to Nessus, the deepest layer of the Hells, and confronted there, the essence of the offer remained the same. Join me, become an archdevil, and you can continue your war against the demons with power and armies beyond anything the celestial realms would grant you. Zariel's transformation did not happen instantly. Based on what we know about her nature and the accounts that survive, we can assume she resisted initially. But Avernus had worn her down. She had seen her crusade end in catastrophic failure. She had been abandoned by the celestial powers who could have rescued her. She had watched thousands die because they believed in her vision. The guilt, the rage, the sense of betrayal. These emotions created cracks in her righteousness that infernal corruption could exploit. When Zariel finally accepted Asmodeus's offer, her transformation was complete and terrible. The angel who had led mortals into battle against evil became an archdevil herself, one of the rulers of the 9 hells. She took command of Avernus, replacing the previous ruler Bel, and threw herself into the blood war with the same intensity she had brought to her crusade. But now she fought for hell rather than heaven, commanded devil legions rather than mortal armies. For the Hellriders who had followed her, this transformation represented the ultimate betrayal. They had charged into Avernus following an angel. That angel had become the very thing they had sworn to fight. Many could not reconcile this reality with the faith that had sustained them. If an angel could fall so completely, what hope did mortals have? The crusade had lasted perhaps days or weeks from the moment they entered Avernus to the final defeat. It was not the extended campaign lasting months that some legends suggest, but a brutal, compressed tragedy that consumed thousands of lives in a terrifyingly short time. The Hellriders had thought they were saving the world. Instead, they had delivered themselves to damnation and created one of the most powerful archdevils in the 9 hells. Their suffering had only just begun. Section 2. The betrayal and abandonment. The immediate aftermath of the battle left the surviving crusaders scattered across the wastelands of Avernus. Those who had not fallen in the 3-way slaughter between devils, demons, and mortals found themselves in small groups, separated from their commanders, with no clear understanding of where they were or what had happened. Many still believed they were in the abyss. The truth that they had been fighting in the 9 hells all along would take time to sink in. You need to understand what those first hours and days were like for these warriors. They had charged through a portal, expecting one kind of hell, and found themselves in another. The retreat route had been sealed by those who fled. Zariel, their angel commander, had vanished beneath a mountain of corpses. The 3 mortal generals who might have maintained order were either missing or captured. The army that had ridden into battle as a unified force was now fragments struggling to survive in the most hostile environment imaginable. Some groups tried to organize defensive positions, hoping to hold out until rescue arrived. They fortified ruins from the recent battle, posted guards, and waited. Days passed, then weeks. No rescue came. The celestial powers who might have intervened showed no signs of doing so. This could imply that Zariel's crusade had been unauthorized from the beginning, that the celestial hierarchies viewed her followers as having made their choice when they defied divine counsel and followed an angel into forbidden territory. The devils who ruled Avernus were in no hurry to deal with the scattered mortal survivors. They had their own concerns following the massive battle. The demonic incursion needed to be fully purged. The battlefield needed to be processed. Bodies sorted between those useful for soul harvesting and those better left to rot. Territory that had changed hands during the fighting needed to be reclaimed and secured. A few hundred or thousand mortals hiding in the wastes were a low priority. But eventually, the devils turned their attention to the trapped crusaders. Devil hunting parties, composed primarily of bone devils and chain devils, began systematic sweeps of the areas where mortals had been sighted. These fiends were patient and methodical. They did not simply charge in and attack. They observed, learned the crusaders' patterns, identified their hiding places, and then struck when the mortals were most vulnerable. The first captures happened quietly. A warrior on watch would simply vanish, dragged into the darkness by a chained devil before they could raise an alarm. A group seeking water at one of the rare sources would find bone devils waiting in ambush. Sleep became treacherous. Devils attacked at random intervals, ensuring the mortals could never fully rest, wearing them down through exhaustion as much as combat. Haruman was among the first of the major commanders to be captured. As a paladin of Helm, he had maintained his faith even after the catastrophic battle. He continued to pray, to seek divine guidance, to believe that his God would not abandon him in this terrible place. When the devils finally surrounded his position, he fought with everything he had. But mortal strength has limits, and the devils had all the time in the world. They overwhelmed him through sheer numbers and dragged him away to one of their processing centers. What happened to Haruman in captivity represents one of the more documented fates of the Crusade's leaders. The devils recognized his value immediately. A paladin, especially one who had commanded forces in the Crusade, could be transformed into a particularly powerful devil if properly corrupted. They subjected him to tortures designed not merely to cause pain, but to break his faith specifically. They showed him visions of Helm turning away from his prayers. They forced him to watch other paladins renounce their gods. They presented philosophical arguments about the futility of serving distant deities who allowed their followers to suffer. Based on what we know of infernal methods, we can assume the process took years, possibly decades. Devils are patient beyond mortal comprehension. They would have cycled between torture and relief, breaking Haruman down piece by piece, then offering him respite if he would just consider their perspective. The goal was not to force transformation, but to make him choose it, to get him to accept corruption willingly. Eventually, Haruman broke. The exact moment and method are not recorded in sources that survive, but the outcome is clear. He accepted a bargain with his captors, agreeing to serve devil interests in exchange for an end to his torment and a position of authority over other mortal captives. He did not undergo full transformation into a devil immediately. Instead, he became what might be called a collaborator, a mortal who worked within the infernal system while maintaining his original form. This decision haunted him, or so later encounters suggest. He told himself he was playing a long game, gathering intelligence, looking for opportunities to help other captives. In practice, he became an enforcer for a pit fiend named Bel, the former ruler of Avernus, who still commanded significant forces. Haruman's job was managing mortal auxiliaries, keeping order among the captured crusaders who had been pressed into service in devil legions. Every order he gave, every punishment he administered, every escape he prevented, took him further from who he had been. Alanthius faced a different fate. The leader of the Riders of Elturel, the paladin whose tactical brilliance had made him Zariel's second-in-command, was captured and brought before the transformed angel herself. Zariel, now an archdevil, saw in her former lieutenant the perfect opportunity to demonstrate her new power and understanding. She did not torture Alanthius in conventional ways. Instead, she tried to convince him. Everything she had said during the crusade remained true, she argued. The blood war needed to be won. Demons had to be defeated. The only thing that had changed was her understanding of how to achieve that goal. The celestial powers had abandoned them because they were weak, because they lacked the will to do what was necessary. Hell offered what heaven would not, the power and determination to actually end the demonic threat. This approach might have worked on someone less devoted. Alanthius had followed Zariel because he believed in her vision of protecting the innocent by striking at evil's source. That vision had not changed, only the methods and the master. But Alanthius possessed something Zariel had lost in her transformation: an understanding that the means matter as much as the ends. Serving devils to fight demons was not a compromise he could accept. It was a fundamental betrayal of everything he had sworn to uphold. When persuasion failed, Zariel tried different tactics. She showed him what had happened to other crusaders who had accepted transformation. They were powerful now, she demonstrated. They commanded respect, wielded authority, suffered no longer. She offered him a position as one of her generals, second only to herself in the hierarchy of her forces. He would lead armies again, wage war against demons again, achieve everything he had wanted when he joined the crusade. Alanthius refused every offer. His faith was not in Zariel, but in the principles she had once embodied. When those principles and Zariel herself diverged, he chose the principles. This refusal infuriated the archdevil. She had him imprisoned in the fortress that would become known as the Bleeding Citadel, held in conditions designed to break his will over time. She did not give up on converting him. Instead, she treated him as a long-term project, checking on him periodically across the decades and centuries, always offering the same bargain, always receiving the same refusal. Yale's fate varies depending on which accounts you examine. Some sources suggest she died during or immediately after the initial battle. Others indicate she survived, but was captured separately from Alantheus and Haruman. What we can reasonably infer is that if she survived the battle, her captivity would have followed patterns similar to other high-ranking crusaders. The devils would have recognized her value and attempted to corrupt or transform her. For the rank and file crusaders, the process was less individualized, but no less terrible. Those captured in the sweeps following the battle were taken to collection points, where they were sorted according to potential value. Warriors who had shown particular skill or cruelty in combat might be marked for transformation into higher-tier devils. Those with strong wills, but no particular combat distinction, might be assigned to torture specialists who would attempt to break them. The majority were simply channeled into the soul processing system that fed the infernal hierarchy. The transformation into Lemures, the lowest form of devil, was perhaps the most common fate. This process stripped away personality, memory, and individual identity. A crusader who had trained for years, who had loved and been loved, who had ridden into Avernus with hopes and dreams and fears, would be reduced to a mindless blob of damned flesh. The devils conducting these transformations were efficient, but not quick. They could have accelerated the process, but where was the benefit in that? Prolonging it meant more suffering, and suffering was the currency of the 9 hells. Some crusaders avoided capture through desperate measures. Small bands fled deeper into Avernus, trying to stay ahead of the hunting parties. They learned to recognize devil patrol patterns, to hide in places too dangerous or worthless for devils to search thoroughly. They survived on scavenged supplies and whatever could be taken from unguarded devil convoys. It was not living so much as postponing death, but it was better than the alternatives. These fugitive groups faced constant erosion. Every encounter with devils cost them members. Starvation and thirst claimed others. The environment of Avernus itself killed some. The heat and toxic air wearing down mortal bodies never meant to endure such conditions. Madness took a few, their minds breaking under the stress of endless flight with no prospect of escape. The groups shrank over months and years until only the hardiest or luckiest remained. The absence of celestial intervention weighed heavily on all survivors. They had followed an angel into battle. Surely, the celestial powers would not abandon mortals who had fought in good faith, who had genuinely believed they were serving righteous ends. But days became weeks, weeks became months, and no rescue materialized. No portals opened to carry them home. No angels descended to retrieve those who had followed Zariel. This abandonment had theological implications the Crusaders struggled to understand. If the gods were good, if celestial powers truly cared about mortals serving righteousness, why leave them to suffer in hell? Several interpretations emerged among the survivors. Some concluded that the crusade had been unsanctioned, that by following Zariel against celestial counsel, they had placed themselves beyond divine protection. This interpretation, at least, made sense of their suffering, though it offered no comfort. Others adopted a darker view. Perhaps the gods were not as benevolent as mortals believed. Perhaps divine beings saw mortals as expendable tools, valued only so long as they were useful. The Crusaders had ceased being useful the moment they became trapped in Avernus, so they were written off as losses. This interpretation bred bitterness and made some Crusaders more susceptible to devil corruption. If the gods did not care about them, why should they continue serving divine interests? A few maintained their faith despite everything. They argued that divine ways were mysterious, that there must be reasons beyond mortal understanding for why rescue had not come. Perhaps this suffering served some greater purpose. Perhaps it was a test of faith that they needed to endure. These believers continued to pray, to seek divine guidance, to trust that eventually they would be delivered. Their faith rarely provided tangible benefits, but it gave them something to hold on to when everything else had been taken away. The devils exploited these theological crises with precision. They would approach Crusaders and sympathize with their abandonment. Yes, it was unfair. Yes, they had been betrayed by the powers they served. But here in the 9 hells, loyalty was rewarded. Service was appreciated. If they would just transfer that service from distant, uncaring gods to present, attentive masters, they would find the recognition and support they deserved. Some accepted these arguments. After months or years of praying to gods who never answered, the prospect of serving powers that at least acknowledged their existence became appealing. They told themselves they were not really changing sides, just being practical. They would serve devils temporarily until they could find a way to escape or until circumstances changed. These rationalizations made the initial betrayal easier, though each subsequent compromise came a bit more naturally than the last. The transformation of Zariel herself became known to the surviving Crusaders gradually. At first, they were just rumors. Some said an archdevil had taken particular interest in the Crusade survivors. Others reported seeing a winged figure commanding devil legions, though surely it could not be their angel commander. When the truth finally became undeniable, that Zariel had not merely fallen, but had embraced her transformation and become the ruler of Avernus itself, the psychological impact was devastating. For many Crusaders, Zariel had been more than just a military commander. She had been proof that the forces of good cared about mortals enough to fight alongside them. Her presence had validated their choice to join the crusade. If an angel herself believed this mission was righteous, how could it be wrong? Learning that this angel had become an archdevil shattered that validation retroactively. Everything they had believed, everything they had sacrificed, had been based on following someone who was now one of the lords of the 9 hells. Some crusaders broke completely upon learning this truth. Their faith, their sense of purpose, their entire understanding of good and evil had been built on Zariel's righteousness. When that foundation crumbled, they had nothing left to stand on. They accepted devil transformations immediately, reasoning that if an angel could become a devil, the distinction between good and evil must be meaningless. Others found their resolve strengthened paradoxically. Zariel's fall proved that corruption was always possible, that even the mightiest could be broken. But it also proved that resistance mattered. Every crusader who refused to follow Zariel into damnation, who maintained their principles despite her transformation, was demonstrating something she had lost. Goodness was not about power or effectiveness. It was about choosing right over wrong even when that choice cost you everything. The scattered survivors developed different strategies for enduring their damnation. Some focused on simple survival, making it through each day without being captured or killed. Others adopted missions, self-imposed objectives that gave structure to their existence. They might dedicate themselves to helping other trapped mortals, or to gathering intelligence about devil operations, or to sabotaging infernal infrastructure in small ways. A few attempted to find Zariel, hoping to reach whatever remained of the angel she had been. These quests almost never succeeded. Zariel was now an archdevil, surrounded by armies and fortifications, accessible only to those she chose to see. The rare crusader who did manage to get an audience usually found only disappointment. The being they spoke with might remember the crusade, might even remember them specifically, but showed no trace of the angel who had led them into battle. That Zariel was gone, consumed by the archdevil she had become. The eternal nature of their damnation became clear as years stretched into decades. Mortals age differently in the lower planes, time itself flowing strangely in those realms. Some crusaders found themselves barely aging at all, their bodies preserved by the same infernal energies that tormented them. Others aged rapidly, decades of wear accumulating in what felt like months. Either way, the prospect of escape grew more remote with each passing year. Families back in Elturel mourned the crusaders and moved on with their lives. Children grew up never knowing their parents. Spouses remarried. The city itself changed, adapting to the loss of so many of its defenders. Eventually, everyone who had personally known the Crusaders died of natural causes. The Crusaders became history, then legend, their actual suffering abstracted into stories told to teach lessons about hubris or courage, depending on the teller's perspective. But in Avernus, those same crusaders endured. They did not have the luxury of becoming legends. They remained trapped in their moment of catastrophic failure, living it over and over as years became centuries. The betrayal never became easier to accept. The abandonment never hurt less. The knowledge that Zariel had fallen never stopped feeling like a wound that would not heal. This was the legacy of the crusade for those who had participated in it. Eternal suffering in the depths of hell, with no prospect of rescue or redemption. Abandoned by the powers they had served and corrupted or destroyed by the forces they had fought. Their story did not end with the battle. It transformed into something worse, an ongoing torment that would continue for as long as the 9 hells endured. Section 3. Eternal Torment and Corruption. The scattered remnants of the crusade faced fates as varied as they were terrible. Not every Hellrider met the same end in Avernus, though none escaped suffering entirely. The devils who processed captured crusaders operated with methodical efficiency, sorting souls according to their potential value to the infernal hierarchy. Understanding these different paths requires examining both what historical sources confirm and what we can reasonably infer from the nature of the 9 hells themselves. Lemure transformation represented the most common fate for captured crusaders. These are the lowest form of devil, barely sentient beings that exist primarily to suffer and occasionally serve as expendable soldiers in the blood war. The process of becoming a lemure is well documented in infernal lore. It strips away individual identity, dissolving memories and personality until nothing remains but a blob of damned flesh animated by minimal consciousness. For warriors who had spent years training, who had formed bonds with comrades, who had ridden into Avernus with specific hopes and fears, this transformation was perhaps the cruelest possible outcome. They retained just enough awareness to know they had been something more, but not enough to remember what that something was. Former paladins and skilled fighters were reduced to mindless things that could barely follow simple commands, their expertise and experience erased as thoroughly as if they had never existed. The devils did not rush these transformations. Based on what we know of infernal methods, we can assume the process was deliberately prolonged. Each crusader would have been kept conscious as their memories began to slip away, forced to experience the dissolution of their identity in terrible slow motion. They would forget the names of loved ones first, then the faces, then eventually the fact that they had loved anyone at all. Skills learned over decades would vanish. The ability to speak coherently would degrade into grunts and moans. The self would simply evaporate, leaving behind only suffering. Not every captured Hellrider became a lemure, however. The devils recognized that some prisoners possessed qualities worth preserving in different forms. Warriors who had shown particular tactical skill or unusual cruelty in combat or other traits the devils valued, were marked for transformation into higher-tier devil forms. These transformations maintained more of the original personality and abilities, while corrupting them to serve infernal purposes. The key to these elevated transformations was consent, however coerced. Devils cannot simply force a soul into a specific form without some degree of acceptance from that soul. This created a grim dynamic where torture served not merely as punishment, but as persuasion. A captured crusader might be subjected to years of torment, then offered a bargain: accept transformation into a bearded devil, a bone devil, or some other form, and the agony would end. You would have power again, purpose, the ability to act rather than simply endure. Many crusaders eventually accepted such bargains. After enduring suffering with no prospect of relief, the offer to end the pain by becoming something else proved impossible to resist. They told themselves they would find ways to escape once transformed, or that they would resist the corruption and maintain their true selves beneath devil flesh. These were lies born of desperation, but necessary lies that allowed them to justify surrender. The actual transformation process varied in duration and intensity. Some crusaders found their bodies changing rapidly, mortal flesh dissolving and reforming into devil shapes over the course of days. Others experienced gradual transformation, their features shifting slowly, horns emerging from skulls, skin hardening into scales, hands becoming claws. The devils seemed to enjoy variety, experimenting with different approaches to see which produced the most psychological trauma. What happened to memories and personality during these transformations is particularly significant. The devils did not simply erase the past. They corrupted it, recontextualizing everything the Crusaders had been. Battles fought to defend the innocent were remembered instead as exercises in domination. Comrades who had been loved became rivals to be defeated. The entire crusade was reframed not as a noble sacrifice, but as a foolish mistake, evidence that serving good had always been weakness rather than strength. This corruption of memory was more insidious than simple erasure. A lemur forgot who it had been entirely. A transformed devil remembered, but understood its past through an infernal lens. The crusader who had charged into Avernus believing in righteousness became a devil who mocked that younger self's naivety. The transformation was not just physical, but philosophical, a complete inversion of values and understanding. Haruman's fate exemplifies one path these transformations could take. Historical sources confirm he survived the initial battle and was captured by devil forces rather than being transformed into a lemur or pressed into immediate devil service. He became what might be termed a mortal collaborator. He retained his human form, but accepted a role enforcing devil authority over other mortal captives. This suggests the devils recognized special value in him. possibly his leadership abilities or his knowledge of the other crusaders. By keeping him mortal while making him complicit in infernal operations, they achieved a particularly cruel corruption. Haruman could remember exactly who he had been, could see clearly how far he had fallen, yet continued serving his devil masters because the alternative was returning to the torture that had broken him. Eventually, sources indicate Haruman underwent full transformation into a devil. He became a general serving under Bel, the former ruler of Avernus, who still commanded significant forces even after Zariel took control of the lair. As a devil general, Haruman commanded legions in the Blood War, the very conflict the original crusade had sought to influence. But now he fought for Hell rather than against it, his tactical brilliance employed in service of the 9 hells. The irony of this transformation would not have been lost on those who knew Haruman's history. He had achieved a version of what he sought when joining the crusade. He was fighting in the Blood War, commanding armies, making a real impact on that eternal conflict. But every value he had held when making that choice had been inverted. He had become exactly what he had sworn to destroy. Alanthius represents a different extreme. Sources confirm he was captured and brought before Zariel herself after her transformation into an archdevil. She tried repeatedly to convert him, offering him positions of power in her reorganized hierarchy of Avernus. Every offer was refused. Alanthius maintained his integrity across decades, possibly centuries, of imprisonment and attempted corruption. His resistance came at terrible cost. Zariel had him held in a fortress that became known as the Bleeding Citadel, where conditions were designed specifically to break his will. This could imply he was subjected to tortures that would have destroyed lesser souls. Yet he endured. The fact that Zariel kept returning to him, kept offering the same bargains, suggests she never fully gave up on corrupting her former lieutenant. His continued refusal represented a kind of victory, proof that not every soul could be broken no matter how much pressure was applied. What sustained Alanthius through such extended torment? Based on accounts of his character before the crusade, we can reasonably assume his faith ran deeper than simple devotion to Zariel. He had followed her because he believed in the principles she embodied, protecting the innocent, standing against evil, sacrificing for others. When Zariel abandoned those principles, he did not. His faith was in the ideals themselves, rather than in any particular being who claimed to represent them. This kind of principled resistance was rare among the captured crusaders, but not unique. Other warriors whose names have been lost to history also refused transformation, maintained their integrity despite torments designed to break them. The devils found these holdouts frustrating because they represented wasted potential. Souls that could have become powerful devils instead remained stubbornly mortal, suffering but uncorrupted. The treatment of these resistant souls varied. Some were kept in solitary confinement for extended periods, locked in cells with no light or sound, isolated from any contact. The idea was that given enough time alone, any mind would fracture. Madness would set in, creating vulnerabilities that devils could then exploit. A crusader who had resisted torture might break under isolation, becoming desperate enough for any contact that they would accept corruption as the price of company. Others were subjected to rotating tortures, different methods applied in sequence to prevent any adaptation or mental preparation. Physical pain one day, psychological torment the next, forced participation in atrocities the day after. The goal was to keep the prisoner constantly off balance, unable to develop coping mechanisms or mental defenses. Each torture was designed to attack a different aspect of their will until something finally cracked. A few resistant crusaders were offered to greater devils as challenges or entertainment. An archdevil might accept such a prisoner as a gift, viewing the attempt to break them as a test of skill. These crusaders sometimes experienced brief periods of relative comfort as they were transferred between different devil lords, only to face fresh torments designed by new torturers with different specialties. The variety itself became a form of torture. The constant uncertainty of what would come next. The soul forges represented another processing path for captured crusaders. These were massive infernal facilities where damned souls were refined and repurposed on an industrial scale. Historical accounts of the 9 hells confirm such facilities exist, though details of their operation come primarily from those who have survived encounters with them rather than from devils themselves. Based on these accounts, we can infer that soul forges operated like factories. Crusaders channeled into them would have lost individual attention entirely, becoming part of a mass processing system. Their essences would be extracted and separated into component parts. Courage, faith, memories of love, tactical knowledge, all the qualities that made them who they were, could be distilled and repurposed for various infernal uses. What emerged from soul forges was often unrecognizable as having been mortal. These were beings of pure suffering given minimal form, consciousness reduced to single-purpose functions. Some became components of infernal machinery, their awareness trapped in weapons or armor or siege engines. Others were reformed into specialized lesser devils designed for specific tasks. A crusader's tactical knowledge might be extracted and implanted into a devil general, while the rest of their essence was scattered across multiple other projects. The Blood War conscription claimed many Hellriders more directly. The eternal conflict between devils and demons consumed both sides at rates that required constant reinforcement. Captured crusaders, already trained warriors, represented valuable resources for this purpose. Rather than being immediately transformed, Some were pressed into service as mortal auxiliaries for devil legions. This path offered a grim choice: fight for the devils against demons, or face immediate torture and transformation. Most chose to fight, reasoning that at least in combat they retained some agency and the possibility of escape. But fighting in a devil legion meant operating under devil command, following devil tactics, participating in devil atrocities. The work changed those who performed it, eroding their sense of self, even without formal transformation rituals. These mortal auxiliaries were treated as expendable by their devil commanders. They were deployed on the most dangerous missions, used as bait to draw out demon forces, assigned to hold positions that could not realistically be held. Many died in these roles, their souls immediately claimed and processed according to infernal law. Those who survived multiple engagements found themselves changing even without deliberate corruption, their thoughts and instincts shifting to match their environment. The ambient corruption of Avernus itself affected all mortals who remained there long enough. The lair was not merely a battlefield, but a realm designed to break the righteous. Simply existing in that environment introduced infernal essence into mortal bodies. Over months and years, this accumulated. Eyes took on reddish tints. Skin grew tougher, more resistant to heat, but also less sensitive to pain or gentle touch. Thoughts became more focused on survival and domination, less capable of empathy or compassion. For crusaders trying to maintain their integrity, this ambient corruption presented a constant challenge. They could resist active attempts at transformation, could refuse devil bargains, but they could not stop breathing Avernus's air or existing in its reality. The corruption was gradual and insidious, changing them in ways too subtle to notice, until the accumulated changes became significant. A crusader might successfully resist for decades, maintaining their sense of self, only to realize one day that they no longer recognized the person they had become. Not every fate ended in corruption or transformation, however. Some crusaders found ways to exist in Avernus while maintaining at least fragments of their original selves. These survivors operated in the margins of infernal society, avoiding capture through constant vigilance and luck. They formed no permanent settlements, maintained no fixed positions, simply moved through the wasteland, staying ahead of devil hunting parties. The psychological toll of this existence was immense. Constant fear, endless flight, no safety or stability. But it was existence, and for some, that was enough. They measured victory in simple terms, surviving another day, helping another trapped soul, resisting one more devil offer. These small victories accumulated into lives that, while terrible, were not entirely without meaning or purpose. The question of what happened to specific named crusaders beyond Haruman and Alantheus remains largely unanswered in surviving sources. Yale's ultimate fate is particularly unclear, with different accounts offering conflicting information. Some suggest she died during the initial battle or shortly after. Others indicate she survived into captivity. Without definitive historical evidence, we can only note that if she survived, her fate likely followed one of the patterns documented for other high-ranking crusaders. What we know with certainty is that the majority of the crusaders who entered Avernus never returned. They were killed in battle, transformed into devils, processed into Lemures, or trapped in the 9 hells in various states of corruption and suffering. The crusade that rode into what they thought was the abyss became permanent residents of Avernus, their suffering extending across centuries. Their torment was not random or chaotic, but systematic. The devils approached corruption with the same methodical efficiency they brought to all their operations. Each crusader was evaluated, sorted, and processed according to their potential value. The system was designed to extract maximum utility from every soul while inflicting maximum suffering in the process. It was evil rendered bureaucratic, horror made routine. This eternal struggle continues for those crusaders who still exist in some form in Avernus. Whether as devils who barely remember being mortal, as resistant souls still clinging to fragments of their original selves, or as Lemures who have forgotten they were ever anything else, the Hellriders remain in the 9 hells. Their suffering is not theoretical or historical, but ongoing, a tragedy that has no end in sight. Section 4. The Survivors and Resistance. Among the scattered remnants of the Hellriders, resistance took many forms. These were not necessarily the strongest warriors or the most skilled commanders, but rather those who found within themselves the capacity to endure without breaking entirely. Their stories represent the various ways mortals attempted to maintain their humanity in an environment designed to destroy it. Alanthius stands as perhaps the most documented example of sustained resistance among the Crusade's survivors. Historical sources confirm he was captured and brought before Zariel after her transformation into an archdevil. Rather than being immediately tortured or transformed, he became the subject of a long-term conversion project that Zariel personally oversaw. She wanted her former second-in-command to join her willingly, to validate her transformation by following her into service to the 9 hells. The offers she made him were substantial. As an archdevil ruling Avernus, Zariel commanded vast armies and wielded power that dwarfed what she had possessed as an angel. She could offer Alanthius positions of genuine authority, the ability to command devil legions in the Blood War, the chance to continue the fight against demons they had both sought to wage. From her perspective, nothing fundamental had changed, except that they now had the resources to actually succeed where the crusade had failed. Alanthius refused every offer. His imprisonment in what became known as the Bleeding Citadel suggests Zariel's frustration with his continued resistance. This could imply she subjected him to tortures designed to break his will. Yet, he endured across what sources suggest were decades, or possibly centuries. The fact that she kept returning to make new offers indicates she never fully gave up on converting him, viewing his eventual corruption as a prize worth pursuing indefinitely. What sustained him through such extended suffering? Based on what we know of his character and actions, we can reasonably infer that his loyalty had never been to Zariel personally, but to the principles she once embodied. He had followed her because she represented a vision of protecting the innocent by confronting evil directly. When she abandoned that vision by becoming an archdevil, he did not abandon it with her. His resistance was not merely stubborn defiance, but philosophical commitment to ideals that transcended any individual being. This kind of principled resistance required extraordinary strength of will. Alantheus would have watched other crusaders accept transformation, would have seen them gain power and relief from suffering, while he continued to endure torment. The temptation to simply surrender, to accept that Zariel might be right, and that serving devils against demons was not fundamentally different from their original crusade, must have been constant. That he continued refusing suggests a clarity of moral vision, rare even among paladins. The other crusaders who survived in Avernus without immediate transformation faced different challenges. Those who avoided initial capture found themselves in a hostile wilderness with no clear objectives beyond simple survival. Avernus offered few resources suitable for mortal life. Water sources were typically poisoned or corrosive. Food had to be scavenged from devil supply lines or taken from the bodies of fallen creatures, neither option particularly appetizing or safe. Shelter provided minimal protection against the ambient heat and toxic atmosphere. These fugitive crusaders learned to navigate Avernus through brutal trial and error. They discovered which areas devils patrolled heavily and which were too dangerous or worthless to monitor closely. They identified hiding places among ruins from ancient battles, locations where the lingering magical residue made devil tracking more difficult. They developed recognition signs that allowed scattered crusaders to identify each other without alerting devil observers. Based on what we know about devil hunting tactics and the geography of Avernus, we can assume these survivors operated as small, mobile groups rather than organized resistance networks. Any attempt to create larger structures would have attracted devil attention and infiltration. The most successful survivors were likely those who stayed isolated or in very small bands, avoiding the kind of coordination that would make them strategic targets rather than mere annoyances. The psychological toll of this existence cannot be overstated. These were warriors who had charged into battle as part of a grand crusade, believing they could change the course of the blood war itself. Now they were reduced to scavenging and hiding, daily objectives limited to finding water and avoiding capture. The gap between their expectations and their reality was a form of torment separate from anything devils directly inflicted. Some crusaders maintained their sanity through ritual and routine. They continued to pray despite receiving no divine response. The act of prayer itself providing structure and familiarity. They maintained weapons and armor, even when there was little opportunity to use them. The familiar tasks of cleaning and repair, connecting them to their identities as warriors. They told stories about the crusade and their lives before it, keeping memories alive through repetition, even as years made those memories increasingly distant and dreamlike. Others found purpose in helping newly arrived mortals who found themselves trapped in Avernus. The 9 hells claimed new victims constantly through various mechanisms. Devils captured mortals during raids on the material plane. Foolish wizards summoned fiends and found themselves dragged back when the summoning went wrong. Warlocks who made infernal pacts discovered the terms included clauses that allowed their souls to be claimed under certain conditions. These new arrivals had no knowledge of how to survive in Avernus, making them easy prey for devil hunting parties. Veteran Hellrider survivors sometimes intervened to help these newcomers. They would provide basic survival information, which water sources could be purified with minimal magic, which devil types to avoid absolutely versus, which might be bargained with, which areas of Avernus were more survivable than others. This assistance rarely saved the newcomers permanently, but it might buy them days or weeks of freedom before eventual capture. The motivation for providing such help varied. Some crusaders did it because helping others was who they were at their core, an identity that even Avernus could not completely erase. Others found that having someone to teach gave them purpose beyond mere survival. A few admitted to more selfish reasons. Newly arrived mortals often had supplies or information from the material plane that might prove useful, but whatever the motivation, these acts of assistance created a strange continuity where the Hellriders as a tradition persisted even as individual crusaders fell. The corruption of former comrades represented one of the most painful aspects of long-term survival in Avernus. Encountering a Hellrider who had accepted transformation into a devil, who now served the very forces the crusade had opposed, was devastating. These were warriors who had ridden into battle alongside you, had sworn the same oaths, had believed in the same ideals. To see them with horns and scales, commanding devil subordinates or hunting other mortals, forced survivors to confront the possibility that they too might eventually fall. Sometimes these encounters led to combat. Former friends faced each other across battlefields, one still clinging desperately to their mortal form and principles, the other fully integrated into the infernal hierarchy. The transformed devils often tried to convince their former comrades to surrender, arguing that transformation was liberation rather than damnation. These arguments were particularly persuasive precisely because they came from people who had once shared your values and experiences. Haruman's transformation into a devil general serving under Bel represents, perhaps, the most prominent example of this corruption among the Crusade's leadership. Sources confirm he eventually accepted full transformation after serving as a mortal enforcer for devil interests. As a devil general, he commanded forces in the Blood War, applying the tactical knowledge he had developed as a mortal paladin to infernal military operations. Any Hellrider survivor who encountered General Haruman would have to grapple with the reality that one of their former commanders now served hell itself. The question of how many Crusaders survived in some form across the centuries is impossible to answer definitively. The initial crusade numbered in the thousands, but most fell in the initial battle or were captured and processed shortly after. Of those who initially escaped capture, the vast majority were eventually hunted down, corrupted, or killed. The handful who survived long-term represented statistical anomalies, individuals who combined skill, luck, and will in proportions that allowed them to endure what destroyed others. Time itself functioned strangely for these long-term survivors. Avernus did not follow the same temporal patterns as the material plane. Some Crusaders found themselves barely aging despite decades of subjective experience. Others aged rapidly, their bodies deteriorating under the constant stress, even as their time in Avernus measured in mere years by material plane standards. Either way, the Crusaders became increasingly disconnected from the world they had left behind. By the time Elturel itself was dragged into Avernus in 1494 Dale reckoning, 140 years had passed since the original crusade. Most of the Crusaders' families had died generations earlier. The city they had fought to protect had changed dramatically, shaped by events they knew nothing about. The Hellriders who survived to witness Elturel's arrival in Avernus faced the terrible irony that their crusade, meant to protect the city, had marked it for eventual damnation. The city's appearance in Avernus, chained above the river Styx, represented both opportunity and tragedy for the surviving Crusaders. Some attempted to reach Elturel, hoping to help its citizens escape, or at least prepare them for the horrors they would face. The distances involved and the devil forces guarding the city made this nearly impossible for scattered survivors operating alone or in small groups. By the time news spread and Crusaders could attempt to converge on the city's location, events had already unfolded. A few survivors did manage to make contact with Elturians. These reunions were complicated and emotional. The people of Elturel knew stories about the Hellrider crusade, legends passed down across generations, but encountering the actual Crusaders, transformed by over a century of suffering, into scarred and hardened survivors, confronted them with the reality behind the legends. These were not glorious heroes, but damaged beings who had endured horrors beyond normal comprehension. The Elcherian crisis eventually resolved through the actions of adventurers who entered Avernus to save the city. The details of this resolution involved confronting Zariel herself and the infernal pact that had enabled Eltural's transport to the Nine Hells. For the Hellrider survivors who witnessed or participated in these events, the city's eventual return to the material plane brought mixed emotions. Joy that their home survived and its people were saved, sorrow that they themselves remained trapped in Avernus, unable to return with the city they had defended. Some survivors had hoped that helping save Elturel would earn them redemption, that the gods or celestial powers would recognize their continued service to good and grant them escape. This hope proved largely false. The divine beings who had abandoned them over a century earlier showed little inclination to intervene on their behalf. The Hellriders remained damned, their suffering extended indefinitely regardless of their continued commitment to righteousness. This final abandonment broke some who had endured everything else. To fight for over a century, maintaining your integrity, to help save your city from damnation, and still be left in hell with no prospect of rescue, was a cruelty that exceeded even what devils had inflicted. A few crusaders who had resisted all attempts at corruption finally accepted devil transformations after Elturel's escape, reasoning that if service to good brought no reward or recognition, there was no point in continuing to suffer for principles no divine power seemed to value. Others found their resolve paradoxically strengthened. Helping save Elturel proved that their actions still mattered, that they could still make meaningful differences even from the depths of the Nine Hells. They did not need divine recognition or the promise of reward. The work itself was sufficient. Maintaining their principles in the face of absolute corruption had inherent value independent of whether anyone acknowledged it or compensated them for it. The ongoing resistance of these survivors, such as it was, became less about achieving victory than about maintaining identity. They fought not because fighting would free them, but because fighting was who they were. They helped others not for recognition, but because helping was what good people did. They resisted corruption not because resistance would be rewarded, but because surrendering would mean losing the last thing Avernus could not take by force, their choice of who to be. This eternal struggle continues for whatever Hellriders still exist in Avernus. They are not numerous enough to threaten the archdevils or meaningfully disrupt infernal operations, but they persist, scattered across the layer like embers that refuse to be extinguished. Each represents a living argument against the devil's philosophy that all beings can be corrupted, given sufficient pressure and time. Each demonstrates that goodness can exist even in evil's stronghold, not as conquest, as defiance, not as triumph, but as endurance. Their resistance matters not for what it achieves externally, but for what it preserves internally. In the depths of damnation, surrounded by corruption, abandoned by the powers they served, they choose still to remain themselves. That choice, repeated day after day across centuries, represents the truest form of heroism. Maintaining your principles when doing so costs you everything and benefits you nothing. Section 5. Legacy and the Eternal Struggle. The Hellriders' crusade ended over a century before Elturel would face its greatest crisis. Yet, the consequences of that doomed charge into Avernus shaped everything that followed. Every oath sworn in Elturel's temples, every strategy debated among its defenders, every theological discussion about the nature of righteousness and divine will, all existed in the shadow of those who rode into the 9 hells and never returned. The crusade became more than history. It became mythology, a lens through which the city understood its relationship with good and evil. Understanding this legacy requires examining how the crusade transformed Elturel itself. The city that sent forth thousands of its finest warriors in 1354, Dale Reckoning, was fundamentally changed by their loss. Entire families were destroyed. The Riders of Elturel, the elite cavalry force that had protected the city for generations, was gutted. Where once hundreds of trained warriors patrolled the roads and defended against threats, suddenly there were barely enough to man the city's walls. The immediate aftermath left Elturel dangerously vulnerable. Threats that the riders would have easily handled became serious challenges. Bandits grew bold. Monsters moved into territories they had previously avoided. The city struggled to rebuild its defensive capabilities, while mourning the catastrophic loss of so many of its people. This period of weakness created opportunities for those who wished Elturel harm, and the city's survival through those years owed as much to fortune as to the desperate efforts of those who remained. The response was to never again allow such vulnerability. Elturel rebuilt its Hellrider order, but the new generation operated under very different principles than their predecessors. They would defend the city and its immediate surroundings, yes, but they would not venture into other planes to wage war against evil at its source. The aggressive philosophy that Zariel had advocated, that had resonated so powerfully with the original Crusaders, was explicitly rejected. Defense rather than offense became the watchword. This shift represented a fundamental change in how Elturel understood righteousness. Before the crusade, there had been genuine debate about whether the forces of good should take the fight to evil proactively. After the Crusade's catastrophic failure, such ideas became associated with hubris and disaster. The consensus shifted decisively toward protecting what you could rather than attempting to destroy evil everywhere it existed. This could imply a loss of confidence, a collective trauma that made the city too cautious in subsequent generations. The theological implications rippled across Faerun for decades. Religious scholars debated what the Crusades' failure meant about divine will and mortal agency. Some argued it demonstrated that mortals should remain in their proper spheres, that the lower planes were battlegrounds for celestials and fiends rather than human warriors. The crusade had failed in this interpretation because it violated the natural order of things, placing mortals where they did not belong. Others contended the failure was specific rather than general. With better planning, more divine support, different leadership, perhaps such a crusade could succeed. Zariel's transformation into an archdevil was proof not that the concept was flawed, but that she personally had been a more humble commander, one less susceptible to pride and corruption, might have led the same crusade to victory, or at least to honorable defeat rather than damnation. A darker interpretation gained traction among certain philosophical circles. Perhaps the gods had allowed the crusade to fail deliberately, as a lesson to mortals about the limits of their agency by letting the Hellriders charge into damnation and then abandoning them. The divine powers demonstrated that mortal righteousness meant nothing without celestial support. The message was one of dependence, a reminder that no matter how brave or skilled or faithful you were, you accomplished nothing if the gods chose not to aid you. This interpretation troubled many precisely because it seemed supported by the facts. The Crusaders had been genuinely righteous in intention. They had followed an angel into battle against what they believed was the abyss. They had fought bravely and with faith. Yet they had been abandoned completely, left to suffer in the 9 hells for over a century with no divine intervention whatsoever. If goodness and faith were not sufficient to earn divine protection, what was the point of being good at all? The question of why the celestial powers never rescued the trapped crusaders has no definitive answer in surviving sources. Based on what we know about celestial hierarchies and their policies regarding mortal intervention, we can reasonably infer several possible explanations. The crusade may have been explicitly unsanctioned, meaning those who participated placed themselves outside divine protection by defying celestial counsel. Alternatively, the celestial powers may have judged that intervening would set a precedent they could not afford, that rescuing mortals who deliberately entered the lower planes would encourage others to make similar reckless choices. The most cynical interpretation suggests the gods simply did not care enough. Mortal souls, from the perspective of eternal divine beings, might be viewed as abundant and ultimately replaceable. The loss of a few thousand crusaders, while tragic, was not significant enough to warrant the resources and risk that a rescue operation would require. This interpretation gains some support from the fact that when Elturel itself was dragged into Avernus over a century later, divine intervention was minimal. It fell to mortal adventurers to resolve that crisis, suggesting the gods remained unwilling to directly confront the infernal powers, even when an entire city was at stake. The crusade transformed how military strategists across Faerun thought about warfare against fiendish forces. Before Zariel's charge into Avernus, there had been romantic notions about courage and faith overcoming any obstacle. Paladins spoke confidently about their ability to face down any evil. The crusade shattered that confidence by demonstrating that fiends on their home territory wielded advantages that mortal bravery could not overcome. This realization led to more defensive tactical doctrines. Rather than seeking out and destroying infernal strongholds, defenders focused on preventing such strongholds from being established. Rather than charging through portals to attack devils in the nine hells, they developed methods for closing portals quickly to minimize fiendish incursions. The entire strategic philosophy shifted from aggressive to conservative, from taking the fight to the enemy to ensuring the enemy could not bring the fight to you. Some military theorists argued this represented wisdom learned at terrible cost. Others contended it showed that the forces of good had been traumatized into passivity, that the pendulum had swung too far toward caution. These debates often split along generational lines, with those who remembered the Crusade's immediate aftermath favoring defensive strategies, while younger warriors who knew the Crusade only as history sometimes pushed for more aggressive approaches. The continued war in Avernus meant the Hellriders' struggle never truly ended. While the original Crusaders were dead or transformed beyond recognition, the conflict they had sought to influence raged on unchanged. The blood war between devils and demons consumed both sides at rates that made the Crusade's casualties seem insignificant by comparison. Whatever impact the Hellriders had hoped to make had been utterly negligible in the grand scope of that eternal conflict. New mortals found themselves in Avernus constantly through various mechanisms, and some encountered remnants of the original Crusade. A devil general who had once been Haruman, Alanthius still imprisoned in the Bleeding Citadel, scattered survivors who had maintained their resistance for over a century. These encounters connected new victims to the Crusade's legacy, creating a strange continuity where the Hellriders persisted as a tradition, even as individual Crusaders fell. The paths to redemption for the trapped Crusaders remained frustratingly unclear. In theory, souls claimed by the nine hells could be redeemed through sufficient penance or through intervention by more powerful beings. In practice, such redemptions were extraordinarily rare. The devils had no interest in releasing souls they had claimed. The gods who might intervene had shown no inclination to do so for the Hellriders specifically, and over a century of abandonment suggested they never would. A few individual Hellriders did escape or were rescued over the decades, though these cases were exceptional. Based on what we know about planar mechanics and infernal contracts, we can assume these escapes required specific, unusual circumstances that could not be replicated. Perhaps a celestial being who had loved a particular crusader spent decades searching for them and finally succeeded. Perhaps a crusader completed some seemingly impossible task that earned their release through the exact terms of an ancient bargain. Perhaps chaos in the Blood War created opportunities for escape that otherwise would not have existed. Those who did return to the material plane found themselves profoundly changed. Decades or centuries in the 9 hells left marks that could never be fully erased. They struggled to reconnect with mortal society, to relate to people who had never experienced such suffering. The world they returned to was not the one they had left. Everyone who had known them was dead. The city had changed. They themselves had changed in ways that made readjustment nearly impossible. But these success stories were vanishingly rare. For every Hellrider who escaped, thousands remained trapped. The vast majority would never see redemption, would never return to the material plane, would endure their suffering until whatever spark of identity they retained finally extinguished. This reality made their continued resistance all the more significant. They fought not because fighting would earn them freedom, but because fighting was all they had left, the last expression of agency in a place designed to strip agency away. The symbolic meaning of the Hellriders evolved dramatically over the century following the crusade. Initially, they were tragic heroes, brave warriors who had made a noble sacrifice that unfortunately failed. As decades passed, and the full scope of their ongoing torment became clearer through various sources, this interpretation shifted. They became cautionary examples, warnings about what happened when mortals overreached, when pride masqueraded as righteousness. But among paladins and other warriors who faced evil directly, the Hellriders took on a different symbolic resonance. They represented commitment that transcended consequence. They had sworn oaths to defend the innocent and fight evil, and the surviving crusaders had upheld those oaths, even when doing so led to damnation. Even when the gods themselves abandoned them, they did not abandon their principles. That kind of integrity, that refusal to compromise even in the depths of hell, deserved admiration regardless of the Crusade's failure. This dual symbolism created complex feelings among those who invoked the Hellrider's memory. Eltural's paladins swore their oaths in the names of fallen Hellriders, honoring their commitment while being careful not to repeat their mistakes. The crusade became both inspiration and warning, proof of what mortals could attempt and evidence of what they should not. Zariel's role in this legacy grew increasingly central as centuries passed. The angel who had led the crusade had become the archdevil ruling Avernus, one of the 9 hells' most powerful beings. Her transformation was complete. She commanded the very devil legions, the the crusade had fought against. She participated in the Blood War with strategic brilliance honed across over a century of constant warfare. She showed no trace of the righteousness that had once defined her. Yet sources suggest that fragments of her original self remained buried somewhere within her infernal nature. This possibility created opportunities and dangers in equal measure. If Zariel could be redeemed, if the angel she had been could be recovered from the archdevil she had become, it would be one of the most significant victories good could claim against evil. But attempting such redemption meant confronting one of the most powerful beings in the nine hells, a task that had destroyed everyone who had tried it. The question of whether Zariel could or should be redeemed divided those who considered it. Some argued she deserved no mercy, that she had become a monster responsible for immeasurable suffering and needed to be destroyed rather than saved. She had corrupted countless souls, commanded atrocities across over a century, personally tortured some of the very crusaders who had followed her. The angel she had been was effectively dead, replaced by something irredeemable. Others contended she was herself a victim, corrupted by the same infernal forces that had destroyed so many Hellriders. If those forces were strong enough to transform an angel into an archdevil, could anyone truly be blamed for falling to them? Zariel deserved the same compassion that would be extended to any other damned soul. The same effort at redemption that goodness demanded be attempted for all beings capable of change. These debates were not merely academic when Elturel was dragged into Avernus in 1494 Dale reckoning. The city's transport to the Nine Hells was directly connected to Zariel and the original Crusade's legacy. The Archdevil had never forgotten the city that spawned the warriors who challenged her, and the infernal pact that enabled Elturel's damnation was revenge delayed across 140 years, but not abandoned. The resolution of that crisis involved directly confronting the Crusade's legacy. Adventurers who sought to save Elturel had to understand what had happened over a century earlier, had to grapple with the choices made by Zariel and her followers. In some accounts, they encountered surviving Hellriders who provided crucial assistance. In others, they faced devils who had once been crusaders, corrupted versions of former heroes now serving the archdevil. The attempt to redeem Zariel herself became central to at least one path toward saving Elturel. By recovering her sword, a holy weapon she had wielded as an angel, and presenting it to her at the right moment, it was theoretically possible to reach whatever remained of her original self. This could imply that redemption was always possible, that no fall was so complete that rising again became impossible. Though sources differ on whether such redemption actually succeeded. The eternal struggle of the Hellriders continues in the present day, though their numbers dwindle with each passing year. Survivors still resist in Avernus, scattered and isolated, fighting battles They cannot win against enemies they cannot defeat. They persist not from hope of victory, but from refusal to surrender, maintaining their integrity as the last thing the 9 hells cannot take by force. For these warriors, there is no end in sight. They cannot leave Avernus. They cannot meaningfully weaken the infernal hierarchy. They can only endure day by day, choosing resistance over surrender, even when resistance seems futile. This persistence carries meaning beyond any material impact their actions might achieve. Every Hellrider who refuses transformation is a living argument against the devil's philosophy that all beings can be corrupted given sufficient pressure. Every act of kindness in a place designed to reward cruelty demonstrates that environment does not determine character. Every moment of hope maintained in the depths of despair proves that the mortal spirit possesses strength even archdevils cannot fully comprehend. The Hellriders remind us that heroism does not require victory. Sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is continue fighting when defeat is certain. Continue caring when apathy would be easier. Continue choosing right over wrong when no one is watching and no reward awaits. They embody the principle that maintaining your integrity has inherent value regardless of whether it achieves external goals or earns divine recognition. Their story also serves as a warning about the limits of righteousness acting alone. Faith and courage are necessary, but not sufficient to overcome all evils. Some battles truly cannot be won by mortal warriors, no matter how skilled or dedicated. Recognizing these limits is not cowardice, but wisdom. The Hellriders' tragedy lay not in their desire to fight evil, but in their failure to acknowledge when a particular fight was beyond their capabilities. Yet even acknowledging this, one cannot help but admire them. They saw evil and refused to look away. They believed they could make a difference and tried with everything they had. They chose action over comfort, sacrifice over safety. That their sacrifice led to suffering rather than triumph does not diminish the nobility of their choice. It merely demonstrates that nobility alone is not enough, that good intentions do not guarantee good outcomes. The Hellriders exist in a strange space between inspiration and cautionary tale, between heroic legend and tragic failure. They are both simultaneously, and perhaps that dual nature makes them more valuable as symbols than they would be as simple heroes or simple villains. They remind us to be brave while also teaching us to be wise, to fight for what is right while also recognizing what is possible. Their eternal struggle in Avernus continues whether anyone in the material plane remembers them or not. Those who still exist in some form, whether as resistant souls clinging to fragments of their original selves, or as corrupted devils who barely remember being mortal, remain in the 9 hells. Their suffering is not theoretical or historical, but ongoing. A tragedy that spans over a century and shows no signs of ending. when you swear an oath, when you commit yourself to principles larger than personal benefit, you walk in the Hellriders' footsteps. Your circumstances may be less extreme, your stakes lower, your suffering more moderate, but the fundamental choice is the same. Will you maintain your integrity when doing so costs you? Will you stand by your principles when no reward is offered? Will you choose right over easy, difficult over comfortable, sacrifice over safety? The Hellriders answer yes to these questions every moment they endure in Avernus. Their answer echoes across the plains, a whisper that reaches anyone who listens. You can be more than your circumstances. You can choose who you are regardless of what happens to you. You can maintain your humanity even in hell itself. The choice is always yours, and that choice always matters, even when no God is watching and no celestial power intervenes. So remember the Hellriders when you face your own battles, whatever those may be. Remember that courage without wisdom leads to tragedy, but also that wisdom without courage accomplishes nothing. Remember that your principles have value independent of whether they protect you or bring you reward. Remember that you are defined not by what happens to you, but by how you respond to what happens. The Hellriders charged into Avernus, believing they could save the world. They failed catastrophically. But in that failure, they demonstrated something more important than any victory could have proven. They showed that the mortal spirit, properly directed, possesses a strength that even hell cannot fully break. They revealed that heroism is not about winning, but about refusing to surrender who you are no matter what you face. Their struggle is eternal, their suffering ongoing, their resistance unbroken after over a century. And in that endless fight, they achieve a kind of victory that transcends conventional success or failure. They prove that you can damn someone's body, but not necessarily their soul. That you can imprison someone in hell, but not necessarily corrupt their heart. That you can take everything from someone except their choice of who to be. That is the legacy of the Hellriders. Not a tactical victory or a strategic achievement, but a philosophical truth demonstrated through over a century of suffering. Good and evil are not mere abstractions or positions in a cosmic hierarchy. They are choices you make, principles you uphold, stands you take regardless of cost. The Hellriders chose good in the depths of evil itself and maintained that choice across over a century of torment. Their story may be tragic, but it is not hopeless, because hope, like goodness, is a choice rather than a circumstance. You can hope in hell. You can love in a place designed to destroy love. You can maintain faith even when the gods seem absent. The Hellriders prove this every day they endure. Every moment they choose resistance over surrender. Every time they help another suffering soul despite gaining nothing from it. So when you face your own darkness, remember them. When you must choose between compromise and suffering, think of those who chose suffering rather than surrender their principles. When you wonder whether your choices matter, consider warriors who have resisted meaningfully for over a century despite no prospect of victory or escape. You are not alone in your struggles. The Hellriders fight beside you in spirit, their example a light in any darkness you might face. Their struggle is eternal, but so is their refusal to break. And in that refusal lies a truth that even archdevils cannot suppress, that the mortal spirit, properly cultivated, is among the most powerful forces in any plane of existence, not because it always wins, but because it never has to surrender. Not because it guarantees success, but because it defines who you are regardless of outcome. The screams in Avernus never stop, but neither does the resistance. And as long as even one Hellrider maintains their integrity in the depths of the 9 hells, choosing goodness where evil seems absolute, the crusade continues, not as Zariel envisioned it, not as victory, but as something perhaps more meaningful, as proof that some things cannot be taken, only surrendered, and that those who refuse to surrender can endure anything. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the Hellriders' aftermath and their eternal struggle in Avernus. If you found this exploration meaningful, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Share your thoughts about the Hellriders in the comments below. What would you have done in their situation? Do you think their crusade was noble or foolish? How do you balance courage with wisdom in your own life? Your perspectives add valuable dimensions to these eternal questions. Until next time, may you face your own battles with both the courage of the Hellriders and the wisdom to choose which battles are worth fighting.